I'm Linda Martinez, 34 years old, and I'm standing outside the Chicago courthouse clutching my father's old leather briefcase with trembling hands. The morning wind cuts through my jacket as I watch my own family walk up those stone steps to face me in court. My brother Jerry adjusts his tie, looking confident, while my mother Patricia dabs her eyes with a tissue for the cameras. They're about to accuse me of stealing from the family business, but they have no idea what's hidden in this briefcase. The truth that will destroy everything they've built on lies. Before I tell you how my brother tried to steal everything my father built, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you believe families should stick together, and subscribe for more real-life stories that prove blood isn't always thicker than water. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare began. Growing up in the Martinez family meant growing up around hammers, blueprints, and the smell of fresh lumber. My father, Roberto Martinez, built Martinez Construction Company from absolutely nothing 25 years ago. He started with just a pickup truck, a toolbox, and a dream to provide quality homes for families in the Chicago suburbs. By the time I graduated college, our company was pulling in $2.5 million a year, employing 35 hardworking people, and had built over 300 homes throughout Cook County. My mother Patricia handled the books, keeping track of every penny that came in and went out. She was meticulous with numbers, always making sure the taxes were filed on time and the payroll never missed a beat. Jerry, my brother, who's 2 years younger than me, worked as a site supervisor. He was good with his hands, could read blueprints like a novel, and the construction crews respected him. But business strategy, long-term planning, that was never Jerry's strong suit. When I came back from Northwestern with my business administration degree at 25, Dad welcomed me into the company with open arms. "Linda has the Martinez vision for business," he'd tell clients, beaming with pride. I threw myself into marketing, customer relations, and project management. Within 3 years, I'd helped expand our workforce from 15 to 35 employees and secured contracts with 2 major housing developments. Our family dinners every Sunday at Mom and Dad's house were filled with laughter and stories from the job sites. Jerry would crack jokes about the new guys who couldn't tell a Phillips head from a flathead screwdriver, while I'd share updates about upcoming projects and potential new clients. Dad would sit at the head of the table, listening to both of us with equal pride. But looking back now, I can see the seeds of jealousy that were already being planted. Jerry started asking questions about the company's future, about inheritance, about who would take over when Dad retired. "Don't worry about that now," Dad would say, waving off the questions. "We've got years to figure all that out." Mom, however, started making little comments. "Well, traditionally, a man runs the family business," she'd say when Jerry brought up his concerns. "That's just how these things work." I didn't think much of it at the time. I was focused on doing good work, making Dad proud, and building something meaningful. Jerry's spending habits were getting more noticeable too. New trucks, expensive tools he didn't really need, and stories about nights out with the crew that seemed to happen more and more frequently. When Dad questioned some of the expenses, Jerry would brush it off. "You've got to spend money to make money, right?" And somehow it always got dropped. I should have paid more attention to those warning signs. I should have questioned why Jerry was so interested in the financial side of things when he'd never cared before. But I trusted my family completely. That trust was about to cost me everything. On a cold Tuesday morning in March, our world shattered. Dad collapsed on a job site in Naperville, clutching his chest as paramedics rushed to save him. At 58 years old, Roberto Martinez was gone, leaving behind a company, a family, and a legacy that would soon become a battlefield. The funeral was a blur of flowers, condolences, and handshakes from contractors, clients, and employees whose lives Dad had touched. Everyone kept telling me how much I looked like him, how I had his determination and business sense. But all I could think about was keeping the company afloat while grieving the man who taught me everything about integrity and hard work. 3 days after we buried Dad, Mom called a family meeting in his old office at the house. The walls were still covered with construction photos, architectural drawings, and awards from the Chicago Contractors Association. Jerry sat across from me at Dad's desk, his hands folded, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. "We need to talk about the company," Mom began, her voice steady, despite the tears she'd been shedding all week. "Your father didn't leave specific instructions about who should run things." Jerry leaned forward. "I think it's obvious I should take over as CEO. I'm the son, I understand construction, and the guys on the crews respect me." I felt like I'd been slapped. Dad trained me for this. I know every client, every ongoing project, every supplier relationship we have. I've been handling the business side for 9 years. Mom's expression hardened. "Linda, your father always wanted Jerry to lead the company eventually. A son carries on the family name, the family business. That's how it's supposed to work." But that's not what Dad told me," I protested. "He said I had the vision, that I understood both the construction side and the business side." "Well, he's not here to tell us now, is he?" Jerry's voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "Look, I'm not trying to push you out, sis. We'll work together. But someone needs to be the final decision maker, and that should be me." The compromise we reached felt wrong from the start. According to Dad's will, Mom inherited 60% of the company shares, while Jerry and I each got 20%. I became the interim manager, while Jerry got the title of operations director. Mom would have the final say on major decisions until we figured things out permanently. The division seemed simple enough. Jerry would handle all the construction crew's site management and equipment. I would continue managing finances, marketing, client relationships, and new business development. Mom would oversee everything and make sure we worked together smoothly. But within weeks, things started changing in ways that made my stomach turn. Jerry began bringing in new people, friends of his, who suddenly had jobs as consultants and advisors with salaries that seemed way too high for their experience. When I questioned these hires, Jerry would get defensive. "These guys know the business, Linda. Sometimes you need fresh perspectives." Then came the new supplier contracts. Jerry started working exclusively with Midwest Building Materials, a company I'd never heard of, despite the fact that we'd had solid relationships with 3 different suppliers for over a decade. When I looked at the invoices, the prices were 25% higher than what we'd been paying. "They're more reliable," Jerry explained when I brought it up. "Sometimes you've got to pay a little extra for quality and dependability." But the most disturbing change was how the employees started treating me. Workers who had known me for years, who used to come to me with questions and concerns, suddenly seemed to avoid eye contact. They'd nod politely when I gave instructions, but I could tell they were getting different directions from Jerry. Mom started showing up at the office more frequently, inserting herself into decisions that had always been handled by the operations team. She'd override my choices about which clients to prioritize, which projects to bid on, even which office supplies to order. "I'm just trying to help," she'd say when I objected. "Your father always said I had good instincts about business." 6 months after Dad died, I was sitting in his old office late one evening looking at financial reports that didn't make sense. Despite having more projects than ever, our profit margins were shrinking. Despite charging the same rates, our costs seemed to be spiraling out of control. That's when the feeling really hit me for the first time. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just about grief or adjustment or learning to work together without Dad. This felt deliberate. This felt like a plan. By the time Dad had been gone for 6 months, Martinez Construction was bleeding money. Our revenue had dropped 30%, and we'd lost 3 major clients who'd been with us for years. The Hendersons, who'd commissioned us to build their dream home in Oak Brook, canceled their contract because of repeated delays and cost overruns. The Riverside Housing Development Project, which should have been our biggest contract of the year, went to a competitor after Jerry missed 2 crucial meetings with the developers. When I tried to address these problems in our monthly family meetings, Jerry had an answer for everything. "Linda, your marketing strategies just aren't working anymore. The industry has changed since Dad died. People want to work with experienced contractors, not someone learning on the job." The accusation stung because it felt so unfair. I'd been working in this business for 9 years. I knew our clients personally understood their needs and had built relationships that Dad himself had praised. But Jerry made it sound like I was some college graduate playing with Daddy's money. That's when I decided to dig deeper into our finances. What I found made my blood run cold. Every month there were mysterious payments labeled consulting fees for $15,000 each. When I asked Jerry about them, he was vague. Business development costs, Linda. Sometimes you have to invest in growth opportunities. What kind of business development costs $15,000 a month? Strategic planning, market analysis, that kind of thing? You wouldn't understand the technical side, but when I asked Mom for details, she shut me down completely. You don't need to know every little detail, Linda. Jerry and I are handling the operational expenses. The more I dug, the more wrong things looked. The exclusive contract with Midwest Building Materials was costing us an extra $40,000 per quarter compared to our old suppliers. Jerry's new consultants were being paid more than some of our experienced foremen. And there were purchase orders for equipment and tools that I never saw delivered to any of our job sites. One Thursday evening in September, Jerry and Mom asked me to stay after work for another family meeting. This time, they had a proposal that made everything crystal clear. Linda. Mom began, her voice taking on that sweet tone she used when she wanted something. Jerry and I have been talking, and we think it might be better for everyone if you stepped back from the day-to-day operations. Jerry nodded, looking like he'd practiced this speech. You're great with people, sis, but running a construction company requires a different skill set. Maybe you should focus on starting a family, finding a husband, that kind of thing. What exactly are you suggesting? We want to buy out your 20% stake in the company, Mom said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. We're prepared to offer you $200,000 for your shares. I stared at the number, my heart pounding. $200,000 sounded like a lot of money, but I knew the company was worth at least $2 million, even with our recent problems. My 20% should have been worth $400,000 at minimum. This is half of what my shares are actually worth. Market value has dropped since your father died, Jerry said smoothly. Companies are worth less when they're struggling. We're actually being generous considering the financial situation. The financial situation that you created with your bad decisions. Mom's expression hardened. Linda, this company needs clear leadership. Having 3 people trying to make decisions is tearing us apart. It's better for everyone if Jerry takes full control and you get a nice settlement to start your own life. Dad built this company for both of us. Your father built this company to support the Martinez family, Jerry snapped. And right now, your stubbornness is destroying everything he worked for. I looked at both of them, seeing something in their eyes that I'd never noticed before. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a family discussion. This was an ultimatum. What if I refused to sell? Mom and Jerry exchanged a look that told me they'd already discussed this possibility. Then we'll have to make some difficult decisions about the company's future, Mom said. Jerry has some ideas about restructuring that might not require your input anymore. That night I went home to my apartment and spread Dad's old business files across my kitchen table. I read through contracts, invoices, and financial reports until my eyes burned. The more I studied the numbers, the clearer it became that Jerry and Mom weren't just mismanaging the company. They were systematically stripping it of value while positioning themselves to push me out completely. But I still didn't understand the full scope of what they were doing. That discovery would come later, and it would be so much worse than I imagined. Exactly 1 year after Dad died, I was sitting in my office reviewing a proposal for a new residential development when my assistant knocked on the door. Linda, there's a man here to see you. He says he's from the county courthouse. The process server was polite but direct. Are you Linda Martinez? Yes. You're being served with a civil lawsuit. You have 30 days to respond. My hands shook as I read the legal documents. Patricia Martinez and Jerome Martinez versus Linda Martinez. The allegations made my stomach drop to the floor. They were accusing me of embezzlement, mismanagement of company funds, and breach of fiduciary duty. According to the lawsuit, I had stolen over $300,000 from Martinez Construction and used my position to enrich myself while driving the company toward bankruptcy. The lies were so outrageous, they took my breath away. The document claimed I had written myself unauthorized bonuses, used company credit cards for personal expenses, and diverted funds meant for employee payroll into my personal accounts. Every single accusation was false, but they were detailed enough to sound convincing to someone who didn't know the real story. By the time I finished reading, word had already spread through the office. I could see employees whispering, looking at me with suspicious glances. Some of them had worked for my father for over 10 years. Now they were wondering if his daughter was a thief. Jerry appeared in my doorway with a security guard I'd never seen before. "Linda, I'm sorry it came to this, but you need to clean out your office. We've changed the locks and frozen the company bank accounts pending the investigation. Jerry, you know these accusations are lies. I know you've been acting strange since Dad died. I know the company has been losing money ever since you took over the financial side. And I know Mom and I can't just stand by and watch you destroy everything Dad built." The security guard escorted me to my car like I was a criminal. As I drove home, I called 3 different attorneys, but none of them would take my case without a $50,000 retainer. The money I had in savings wouldn't be nearly enough to fight a protracted legal battle against my own family. That night was the darkest of my life. I sat alone in my apartment reading and rereading the lawsuit papers, trying to understand how the people who were supposed to love me most could do something so cruel. The phone rang several times, but I didn't answer. I couldn't face talking to anyone about what was happening. But by morning, something had shifted inside me. Maybe it was remembering all the times Dad had told me that Martinez meant something in this community. Maybe it was thinking about the employees who depended on the company for their livelihoods. Or maybe it was just pure stubbornness. But I decided I wasn't going to let Jerry and Mom destroy Dad's legacy without a fight. I needed evidence, real evidence, and I had a feeling I knew where to find it. The next Saturday, I drove to Mom and Dad's house in Elmhurst. Mom's car wasn't in the driveway, and Jerry was at a job site in Schaumburg. Using the key I'd had since high school, I let myself into the house where I'd grown up. Dad's office was exactly as he'd left it. His reading glasses were still on the desk next to a half-finished crossword puzzle. His coffee mug, stained and chipped from years of use, sat next to a stack of construction magazines. The smell of his aftershave still lingered faintly in the air. I was looking through his filing cabinets when I remembered something. Dad used to joke that Mom didn't know about his secret hiding place behind the bookshelf. As kids, Jerry and I thought it was just a game, but now I wondered if he'd actually kept important things there. I pulled out the heavy construction manual that had always seemed oddly placed among Dad's novels and business books. Behind it was a small fireproof safe I'd never noticed before. The combination lock was set to Mom and Dad's anniversary date. Inside the safe were documents that changed everything. There was a handwritten ledger in Dad's familiar scrawl, dated entries going back 5 years. Page after page of detailed records showing money that Jerry had borrowed from the company. $20,000 in March 2018 for a personal emergency. $15,000 in July 2018 for equipment that was never delivered. Another $30,000 in December 2018 for consulting services that were never provided. The total amount Jerry had stolen over 5 years was $340,000. But the ledger contained more than just numbers. Dad had written notes next to many of the entries. Jerry says he'll pay this back when his investment pays off. Patricia suggested we handle this quietly to avoid family conflict. Jerry promised this was the last time. The final entry was dated just 2 weeks before Dad's heart attack. Jerry's gambling debts are getting worse. Patricia wants me to keep covering for him, but this has to stop. I need to talk to Linda about taking over completely. Jerry needs help, not more money. There was also a letter written in Dad's handwriting but never sent. It was addressed to me. Linda, if you're reading this, something has happened to me before I could fix the mess we're in. Jerry has been stealing from the company for years, and your mother has been helping him cover it up. I kept thinking he would change, that family loyalty meant protecting him from the consequences of his choices. I was wrong. I've scheduled an appointment with our attorney to change my will. You should inherit 70% of the company, not 20. Jerry needs professional help, not access to more money he can steal. I'm sorry I waited so long to do the right thing. The appointment is next Tuesday. I pray I live long enough to fix this. Dad died the Monday before that Tuesday appointment. At the bottom of the safe were photocopies of bank statements, canceled checks, and invoices that proved the systematic fraud Jerry and Mom had been committing. The consulting fees were going to shell companies that Jerry had set up. The overpriced supplies from Midwest Building Materials were being sold by Jerry's friend Danny, who was giving Jerry a 30% kickback on every order. They hadn't just been stealing from the company. They had been planning to frame me for their crimes all along. I photocopied everything, put the originals back in the safe, and drove straight to the office of Sarah Johnson, a corporate attorney I'd known since college. Sarah had always been the smartest person in our business law classes, and now she had her own practice specializing in corporate fraud cases. Linda, this isn't just a civil matter anymore, Sarah said after reviewing the documents. This is criminal fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Your brother and mother could go to prison for this. What do? We file a countersuit immediately, and then we prepare for war. Working with Sarah Johnson was like having a professional detective and a legal strategist rolled into one person. She approached Jerry and Mom's fraud case like a puzzle, carefully assembling each piece of evidence into an unbreakable pattern of criminal behavior. The first thing we did was request all the bank records for Martinez construction going back 5 years. What we found was a clear trail of financial manipulation that would have made Bernie Madoff proud. Jerry hadn't just been stealing money randomly. He had created an entire system of fake companies, inflated invoices, and phantom employees to siphon funds from the business. Midwest Building Materials, the supplier Jerry insisted on using exclusively, was owned by his friend Danny Kowalski. Danny had been charging Martinez Construction 40% above market rate for materials, then giving Jerry a 30% kickback on every order. Over 2 years, this scheme had cost the company over $400,000, while putting more than $120,000 directly into Jerry's pocket. The consulting fees were even more elaborate. Jerry had created 3 different shell companies with names like Strategic Construction Consulting and Midwest Development Solutions. These companies existed only on paper, but they were billing Martinez Construction $15,000 a month each for services that were never provided. The money went into bank accounts that Jerry controlled, and from there it funded his gambling habit, expensive dinners, and car payments. But the most damaging discovery was a series of emails between Jerry and Mom that Sarah's private investigator had recovered from the company server. In them, they discussed their plan to blame the company's financial problems on me, force me to sell my shares at below market value, and then restructure the business under Jerry's sole control. One email from Mom to Jerry was particularly damning. Linda is getting suspicious about the consulting fees. We need to move faster on getting her out. Once she's gone, we can clean up the books and make this look like her mismanagement caused all the problems. Jerry's response was even worse. Don't worry. I've been planting seeds with the employees that Linda doesn't understand construction. When we file the lawsuit, everyone will believe she was in over her head and made bad decisions. We just need to make sure all the evidence points to her. While Sarah was building our legal case, the personal cost of fighting my own family was devastating. Word of the lawsuit had spread through our industry, and suddenly I was persona non grata at construction association meetings and industry events. Contractors who had worked with Dad for decades crossed the street to avoid talking to me. Suppliers wouldn't return my phone calls. The stress was killing me physically. I lost 15 pounds in 2 months, barely sleeping 3 hours a night. My hair started falling out from stress, and I developed a persistent tremor in my hands. Friends from college kept telling me to just take whatever money I could get and walk away. "Is it really worth destroying your health over a company?" my friend Rebecca asked over coffee. "Maybe Jerry and your mom are right. Maybe you should start fresh somewhere else." But every time I thought about giving up, I would remember Dad's letter. He had trusted me to carry on his legacy, to do the right thing, even when it was hard. He had believed in me enough to want to leave me control of the company he'd spent his life building. I also thought about the employees who had been loyal to Dad for years. People like Miguel Cervantes, who had worked for us for 12 years and was raising 4 kids on his foreman's salary. People like Susan Walsh, our office manager, who had been with the company since before I was born. They deserved to work for a company that operated with integrity, not one run by thieves and liars. The hardest part was dealing with the extended family and community reaction. Jerry and Mom had launched a public relations campaign painting me as an ungrateful daughter who was tearing the family apart out of greed. At church, at the grocery store, at the gas station, people would look at me with disapproval or pity. My cousin Maria cornered me at the post office one day. "Linda, how can you sue your own mother? She's still grieving your father, and now you're putting her through this nightmare. Can't you just forgive and forget? Would you forgive someone who stole from you and then tried to send you to prison for their crimes? But they're family." That word, family. Jerry and Mom had been using it like a weapon, as if sharing DNA gave them the right to steal from me, lie about me, and destroy everything Dad had built. As if family meant I owed them my silence while they committed crimes in my father's name. 3 weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin, Jerry made one last attempt to get me to back down. He showed up at my apartment at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night looking haggard and desperate. "Linda, this has gone too far. We're family. We shouldn't be fighting in court like strangers. You made it a court fight when you decided to steal from Dad's company and then blame me for it. I never meant for things to get this complicated. I borrowed some money, yes, but I was always planning to pay it back. And Mom was just trying to protect the family. You stole over $300,000, Jerry. You created fake companies to hide the theft. You tried to have me arrested for crimes you committed. That's not borrowing money. That's fraud. If you drop the lawsuit, I'll make sure you get a fair settlement. Maybe even more than the original offer. This isn't about money anymore. This is about justice. This is about doing what Dad would have wanted." Jerry's face twisted with an anger I'd never seen before. "Dad's dead, Linda. He doesn't want anything anymore. And if you go through with this trial, you're going to destroy what's left of this family forever. You already destroyed our family when you decided to become a criminal." He slammed the door so hard on his way out that the frame cracked. 2 days later, Sarah called with news that made my stomach drop. "Linda, they've filed an emergency motion to postpone the trial. They're claiming you've been stalking and threatening Jerry." The lies never stopped. Even facing overwhelming evidence of their guilt, they were still trying to manipulate the system to avoid accountability. But Sarah was ready for them. "Don't worry. We have witnesses who can testify about Jerry's visit to your apartment. And frankly, after the judge sees the evidence we're presenting, I don't think he's going to be very sympathetic to any delay tactics." The trial was scheduled to begin on a cold Monday morning in February, exactly 18 months after Dad died. As I walked up those courthouse steps, carrying Dad's old briefcase with all the evidence that would finally expose the truth, I thought about how he used to tell me that the Martinez name meant something in this community. After this trial, it would mean something again. The Cook County Courthouse was built in the 1920s, and walking through its marble hallways always made me feel like I was stepping into history. Judge Barbara Thompson's courtroom was on the 3rd floor, a wood-paneled space with high ceilings and windows that looked out over downtown Chicago. I'd never been inside a courtroom before, but I knew Judge Thompson's reputation. She was known for being fair, thorough, and completely intolerant of anyone who tried to waste her time with lies or theatrics. Jerry and Mom sat at the plaintiff's table with their attorney, Marcus Webb. Webb was everything you'd picture when you thought of an expensive lawyer. Tailored suit, silver hair, and the kind of confident smile that cost $500 an hour. He had a reputation for winning cases through aggressive tactics and making his opponents look incompetent. Mom was dressed in black from head to toe like she was attending another funeral. She'd lost weight since the lawsuit started, and her hair was now completely gray. She kept dabbing her eyes with tissues, playing the role of grieving widow and wounded mother for the jury. Jerry looked more nervous than I'd ever seen him. He was wearing Dad's old blue suit, which was too big for him now. His hands kept fidgeting with his tie, and he avoided making eye contact with me completely. Sarah and I sat at the defendant's table with boxes of evidence stacked beside us. In Dad's old briefcase, we had copies of every document from his secret safe, along with the additional evidence Sarah's investigation had uncovered. Bank records, email printouts, photographs of invoices, and testimony from witnesses who could verify Jerry's criminal behavior. Judge Thompson called the court to order at 9 a.m. sharp. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're here today to determine the facts in the case of Martinez versus Martinez. This is a civil lawsuit involving allegations of embezzlement and mismanagement of a family business. I want to remind everyone that this is a court of law, not a family therapy session. We're here to determine facts based on evidence, not emotions. Marcus Webb gave his opening statement first, and I had to admit he was good at his job. He painted a picture of me as an inexperienced young woman who had been given too much responsibility too soon after my father's tragic death. According to Webb, I had made a series of poor business decisions that drove the company toward bankruptcy, then attempted to cover up my failures by stealing money and blaming others. Linda Martinez may have had good intentions, Webb told the jury, but good intentions don't excuse embezzlement. The evidence will show that she diverted hundreds of thousands of dollars from company accounts for her personal use, then created elaborate lies to avoid taking responsibility for her actions. He pointed to financial records showing the company's declining performance over the 18 months since Dad's death. He showed invoices for consulting services and equipment purchases that he claimed I had authorized without proper oversight. He even had character witnesses ready to testify that I had been acting strangely and making questionable decisions since taking over financial operations. When Webb finished, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. If I didn't know the real story, his version would have sounded completely plausible. Jerry and Mom had done an excellent job of setting me up to take the blame for their crimes. But then Sarah stood up for our opening statement, and everything changed. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just heard was an elaborate fiction designed to cover up a systematic criminal conspiracy. Over the next few days, you're going to see evidence that Jerome Martinez and Patricia Martinez didn't just steal from their family business. They planned for years to steal from it. They executed that plan with calculating precision, and when they realized they might get caught, they decided to frame Linda Martinez for their crimes. Sarah walked to our evidence table and picked up Dad's handwritten ledger. This is Roberto Martinez's personal record of money stolen from his company by his son Jerry. Written in Roberto's own handwriting, it documents over $300,000 in theft over 5 years. Roberto Martinez knew his son was stealing from him, but he kept hoping Jerry would change. Instead, Jerry's crimes escalated until Roberto finally decided to do something about it. Unfortunately, Roberto died before he could implement the changes he planned. She held up copies of the shell company documents. Jerome Martinez didn't just steal money randomly. He created fake companies, submitted false invoices, and even convinced suppliers to participate in kickback schemes that defrauded Martinez Construction of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And Patricia Martinez wasn't an innocent bystander. Email evidence shows she actively participated in planning these crimes and helped Jerome cover them up. By the time Sarah finished her opening statement, the entire mood in the courtroom had shifted. The jury was leaning forward, paying attention in a way they hadn't during Webb's presentation. Even Judge Thompson looked intrigued. The first day of testimony focused on establishing the timeline and the basic facts about Martinez construction. Sarah called Miguel Cervantes, our longtime foreman who testified about the company's solid reputation and financial stability during the years when Dad was alive and actively managing operations. Mr. Martinez built that company on trust, Miguel told the jury. He never cut corners, never cheated customers, and never asked us to do anything that wasn't right. When Linda took over after he died, she tried to keep things running the same way. But Jerry started making changes that didn't make sense to those of us who'd been there for years. Miguel described how Jerry had insisted on using Midwest building materials, despite their higher prices and sometimes inferior quality. We told Jerry we could get the same materials for 30% less from suppliers we'd worked with for years, but he said we had to use Midwest exclusively. When we asked why, he just said it was a business decision. Webb tried to discredit Miguel during cross-examination, suggesting that he was just a construction worker who didn't understand complicated business relationships. But Miguel held his ground, calmly explaining that after 12 years in the construction business, he knew the difference between a good deal and a ripoff. The second day brought Susan Walsh, our office manager, who had been with the company since before I was born. Susan testified about the unusual financial transactions she'd noticed after Dad died, especially the consulting fees that Jerry had instructed her to process without asking questions. I'd been handling the books for Martinez Construction for 15 years, Susan explained. I knew every regular expense, every supplier, every contractor we worked with. When Jerry started submitting invoices for companies I'd never heard of, I asked him about it. He told me it was none of my business, and just to process the payments. Susan also testified about Jerry's behavior change after Dad died. Jerry had always been friendly and easygoing, but he became secretive and defensive about financial matters. He started locking his office when he left, which he'd never done before. And he stopped including Linda in meetings with suppliers and contractors, which was unusual because she'd always been involved in those relationships. On the third day, Sarah called the handwriting expert who had analyzed Dad's ledger. Dr. Patricia Williams had 30 years of experience in forensic document analysis and had testified in over 200 court cases. Her testimony was technical but devastating. I analyzed 17 known samples of Roberto Martinez's handwriting against the entries in this ledger, Dr. Williams explained. The letter formation's pen pressure spacing patterns and distinctive characteristics are consistent across all samples. In my professional opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Roberto Martinez wrote every entry in this ledger. Webb spent 2 hours trying to poke holes in Dr. Williams's analysis, but she had answers for every challenge. The ledger was authentic, and it documented Jerry's theft in Roberto's own words. By the fourth day, it was time for Jerry to testify in his own defense. This was the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. My brother was about to lie under oath in front of a jury, a judge, and his own family. Jerry took the stand, wearing the same blue suit, his hands visibly shaking as he was sworn in. Webb led him through a carefully rehearsed story about his dedication to the family business, his grief over losing his father, and his concern about my ability to manage financial operations. I never stole anything from Martinez Construction, Jerry testified. I made some business decisions that Linda disagreed with, but everything I did was intended to help the company grow. The consulting fees were for legitimate services that helped us explore new markets and improve our operations. When Sarah stood up for cross-examination, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mr. Martinez, do you recognize this document? She handed him a bank statement showing deposits into one of his shell company accounts. Jerry studied the paper, his face pale. I'm not sure what this is. This is a bank statement for Strategic Construction Consulting, one of the companies that billed Martinez Construction for consulting services. Do you see your signature on the account opening documents? I may have consulted for them occasionally. Mr. Martinez, you didn't just consult for strategic construction consulting. You owned it. You created it. You were the only person authorized to make deposits or withdrawals. Isn't that correct? I don't remember all the details. Sarah handed him another document. This is the corporate filing for strategic construction consulting. It lists you as the sole owner and operator. You filed this document with the state of Illinois. Do you see your signature here? Jerry's confidence was crumbling. I might have helped them with some paperwork. Help them with paperwork? Mr. Martinez, you created a fake company to bill your family's business for services that were never provided. You stole $15,000 a month for 2 years using this scheme. That's $360,000 in theft. That's not what happened. Sarah pulled out more documents. Bank records showing the flow of money from Martinez Construction to the shell companies, then from the shell companies into Jerry's personal accounts. Receipts for gambling debts, car payments, and expensive dinners that Jerry had paid for with stolen money. Mr. Martinez, were you aware that your father kept a personal record of money you took from the company? I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah handed him Dad's ledger open to a page that showed Jerry's name and a $20,000 entry. This is your father's handwriting documenting money you took in March 2018. Do you remember telling your father you needed $20,000 for a personal emergency? Jerry's face went completely white. I don't remember that. You don't remember borrowing $20,000 from your dying father? Webb objected, but the damage was done. Jerry was falling apart on the witness stand, and everyone in the courtroom could see it. Sarah continued methodically destroying Jerry's credibility, showing him document after document that proved his lies. The shell company filings, the kickback agreements with Danny Kowalski, the emails with Mom planning to frame me for their crimes. Finally, Sarah asked the question that ended everything, Mr. Martinez. If you never stole money from Martinez Construction, why did you and your mother file a lawsuit accusing Linda of the exact crimes that you actually committed? Jerry looked at Webb, looked at Mom, looked anywhere except at Sarah or the jury. I just wanted to protect the family business. Protect it from whom? From Linda's bad decisions. What bad decisions specifically? She wasn't experienced enough to run a construction company. Mr. Martinez, isn't it true that you filed this lawsuit because you knew Linda was getting close to discovering your theft, and you needed to discredit her before she could expose your crimes? No, that's not true. Isn't it true that you and your mother planned to force Linda out of the company so you could continue stealing without interference? No. Isn't it true that everything you've testified to today has been a lie, designed to cover up the fact that you systematically defrauded your father's company for years? Jerry's composure finally snapped completely. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. I was going to pay everything back when my investments paid off, and Linda was always Dad's favorite anyway. She got everything handed to her while I had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. The courtroom erupted. Webb was frantically trying to stop his client from talking, Judge Thompson was banging her gavel for order, and Mom was crying loudly in the gallery. But Jerry kept going, years of resentment and guilt pouring out in a stream of admissions that destroyed any remaining pretense of innocence. You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I took money from the company, but I earned it working construction for 15 years while Linda was playing with spreadsheets. And yes, Mom knew about it, but she was just trying to keep the family together. Judge Thompson restored order and instructed the jury to disregard Jerry's outburst, but everyone knew that was impossible. Jerry had just confessed to everything in open court. When Mom took the stand the next day, she tried to claim she was just following Jerry's instructions and didn't understand the financial implications of what they were doing. But Sarah had emails proving Mom's active participation in planning the fraud and the cover-up. The most damaging piece of evidence was an email Mom had sent to Jerry 3 weeks after Dad's funeral. We need to move quickly to get Linda out before she starts asking too many questions about the consulting fees. Once she's gone, we can restructure everything and make it look like her mismanagement caused the problems. Mom broke down crying on the stand, but it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming and Jerry's confession had sealed their fate. After 6 days of testimony, closing arguments took less than 2 hours. Webb tried gamely to argue that Jerry's admissions were taken out of context and that the real issue was still my supposed mismanagement of the company. But Sarah's closing argument was devastating. Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the evidence. You've heard Jerome Martinez confess under oath to stealing from his family's business. You've seen Patricia Martinez's emails, proving she actively participated in both the theft and the cover-up. And you've seen how they tried to frame Linda Martinez for crimes she didn't commit. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning with their verdict. They found in my favor on every count, awarding damages that included not just the stolen money but also punitive damages for the emotional distress and reputational harm Jerry and Mom had caused. But more importantly, Judge Thompson announced that she was referring the case to the Cook County District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. This court has heard evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, Judge Thompson said. These are serious criminal matters that require prosecution to the fullest extent of the law. As I walked out of that courthouse carrying Dad's briefcase and finally vindicated after 18 months of hell, I thought about how he used to say that the truth always comes out eventually. He was right. It just took longer than I'd hoped. 6 months after the trial ended, I was sitting in Dad's old office at Martinez Construction, looking at financial reports that actually made sense for the first time in 2 years. The company Jerry and Mom had nearly destroyed was not only surviving, but thriving under honest management. The first thing I did after regaining control was fire all of Jerry's cronies and bring back the experienced employees who had been pushed aside during his reign of corruption. Miguel Cervantes became our new site supervisor, and Susan Walsh took over as chief financial officer. We terminated the exclusive contract with Midwest Building Materials and went back to working with the 3 suppliers Dad had trusted for over a decade. Almost immediately, our material costs dropped by 35%. Within 3 months, we had signed 5 new contracts worth over $800,000. The Henderson family, whose dream home project Jerry had bungled, heard about the changes at Martinez Construction and asked us to submit a new bid for their project. When I personally guaranteed that their home would be built with the same integrity and craftsmanship Dad had been known for, they hired us on the spot. The Riverside housing development, which we'd lost due to Jerry's incompetence, also came back to us when the original contractor they'd chosen turned out to be unreliable. By the end of the year, Martinez Construction had 42 employees and was booked solid through the following spring. Jerry's criminal trial took place 4 months after our civil case ended. The Cook County District Attorney's Office prosecuted him for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. Despite having one of Chicago's most expensive criminal defense attorneys, Jerry was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. Mom received a lighter sentence because she cooperated with prosecutors and testified against Jerry in exchange for a plea deal. She got 2 years of probation, 400 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay restitution for her share of the stolen money. The judge also required her to undergo counseling for what the court psychologist diagnosed as enabling behavior and emotional manipulation. The day Jerry reported to prison, I drove to Dad's grave at Graceland Cemetery for the first time since the trial ended. I brought fresh flowers and a copy of the Chicago Tribune article about Martinez Construction's comeback. The headline read, "Daughter Saves Father's Legacy from Family Fraud." "I kept my promise, Dad," I said, placing the flowers on his headstone. The Martinez name still means something in this community. It means honesty, integrity, and treating people fairly, just like you taught me. I also established the Roberto Martinez Memorial Scholarship at Northwestern University's Business School. Every year we give a full scholarship to a student who demonstrates both academic excellence and a commitment to ethical business practices. The first recipient was Maria Santos, a first-generation college student whose father had worked construction his entire life. Dad would have loved that. The hardest part of the aftermath was dealing with the extended family and community relationships that had been damaged during the legal battle. Some people understood what had really happened and apologized for doubting me. Others continued to believe that I had been too harsh on my own family, that blood should be thicker than justice. My cousin Maria, who had criticized me so harshly during the lawsuit, called 6 months after Jerry's conviction. "Linda, I owe you an apology. I didn't understand how serious the fraud was. I thought it was just a family dispute over money. I should have supported you instead of judging you." But not everyone came around. My Aunt Rose, Mom's sister, still refuses to speak to me. At family gatherings, she makes pointed comments about forgiveness and the importance of family loyalty. I've learned to let her comments roll off my back. I know the difference between family loyalty and enabling criminal behavior. The most surprising development was a letter I received from Mom 8 months after her sentencing. She was 3 months into her community service working at a food bank in Cicero when she wrote to me for the first time since the trial. "Linda, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I understand now how wrong I was. The counseling has helped me see that I enabled Jerry's worst behaviors because I was afraid of conflict, and I convinced myself that protecting him was the same as protecting our family. I was wrong about everything. Your father would be ashamed of what I did to you and to his company. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I finally see the truth." I read that letter 3 times before putting it in my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to forgive Mom yet, maybe I never would be, but I could at least acknowledge that she was trying to take responsibility for her actions. That was more than Jerry had ever done. Jerry, for his part, continued to blame everyone except himself for his problems. According to his girlfriend, who called me looking for money to help with his legal fees, Jerry spent his time in prison complaining about how unfairly he'd been treated and planning to appeal his conviction. He never expressed remorse for stealing from Dad's company or for trying to frame me for his crimes. A year after the trial, I ran into Danny Kowalski, the supplier, who had participated in Jerry's kickback scheme at a construction industry event. Danny had avoided criminal charges by cooperating with prosecutors, but his business reputation was destroyed when the details of the fraud became public. "Linda, I just want you to know that I'm sorry about everything that happened," Danny said. "Jerry told me you knew about the arrangement and were okay with it. I should have verified that with you directly, but I trusted him because he was family. I made a lot of bad decisions, and I know they hurt your company. Jerry lied to everyone. He was good at making his crimes seem legitimate, but you're right that you should have checked with me. A lot of heartache could have been avoided if people had asked more questions." Danny's business never recovered from the scandal. Within 18 months, he was working as a sales representative for another building supply company instead of running his own operation. It was a harsh reminder that Jerry's crimes had hurt more people than just our family. 2 years after Dad's death, on the anniversary of his heart attack, I organized a memorial service at Martinez Construction. All of our employees, past and present, were invited to share memories of Dad and celebrate the values he had instilled in the company. Miguel Cervantes gave a speech about Dad's integrity and work ethic that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Roberto Martinez taught us that construction isn't just about building houses, Miguel said. It's about building trust, building relationships, and building a reputation that your children can be proud of. When bad things happened to this company, Linda fought to preserve those values because she understood that they were her father's true legacy. After the memorial service, Susan Walsh pulled me aside. "Linda, I want you to know that your father would be incredibly proud of how you handled everything. It would have been easier to just take the money and walk away, but you fought for what was right. That takes real courage." As I looked around the office that night, seeing photos of Dad with employees' awards from satisfied customers and blueprints for homes that would shelter families for generations, I realized that Jerry and Mom had tried to steal more than just money. They had tried to steal the meaning behind everything Dad had built. But they had failed. Martinez Construction was stronger than ever, built on the same foundation of honesty and integrity that Dad had established 25 years earlier. The company employed more people, served more families, and contributed more to the community than it ever had under Jerry's corrupt leadership. I had learned that family isn't just about sharing blood or a last name. Real family is about people who share your values, who support you when times are tough, and who hold you accountable when you make mistakes. By that definition, Miguel Susan and the other employees who had stood by me during the legal battle were more family to me than Jerry or Mom had ever been. The legal victory had given me back Dad's company, but more importantly, it had given me back my sense of who I was and what I stood for. I was Linda Martinez, daughter of Roberto Martinez, and I carried his name with pride because I had earned the right to do so. Sometimes people ask me if I regret putting Jerry in prison or if I feel guilty about the family relationships that were destroyed. The answer is always the same. I regret that Jerry chose to become a criminal, and I regret that Mom chose to help him, but I don't regret holding them accountable for their actions. Dad used to tell me that the Martinez name meant something in this community, that it represented honesty, hard work, and treating people fairly. Jerry and Mom tried to turn that name into a symbol of fraud and corruption. I couldn't let that happen, not just for my sake, but for the sake of everyone who had trusted the Martinez family over the years. The truth is, family loyalty doesn't mean protecting people from the consequences of their actions. Real loyalty means caring enough about someone to hold them accountable when they're destroying themselves and hurting others. I had tried to be loyal to Jerry and Mom in the way they wanted by staying silent and accepting their lies. But that kind of loyalty would have made me complicit in their crimes. True loyalty meant being faithful to the values Dad had taught me, even when it cost me relationships with people I loved. Even when it meant walking into a courtroom and facing down my own family. Even when it meant accepting that some relationships are too damaged to repair. As I locked up the office that night and drove home through the Chicago streets where Dad had built his reputation one honest deal at a time, I thought about the lesson that had cost me so much to learn sometimes. The people who are supposed to love you most are the ones who will betray you deepest, but that doesn't mean you should stop believing in justice, integrity, and doing what's right. And sometimes when you stand up for those principles, even when it's hard, you discover that you're stronger than you ever imagined. The Martinez name still means something in this community. It means exactly what Dad intended it to mean. And as long as I'm here to carry it forward, it always will. What would you have done if your own family betrayed you like this? Do you think I was right to pursue criminal charges against my brother and mother? Or should family loyalty have come first? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And please hit that like button if you believe that doing what's right is more important than keeping the peace. Subscribe for more real-life stories about justice, betrayal, and the courage it takes to stand up for what you believe in, even when the people you love most are standing against you. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones most worth fighting. I hope you never have to face what I went through, but if you do, I hope you'll find the strength to fight for the truth, no matter what it costs.